Welcome everyone. Today's class is class number 5 in the Joy series. Every class is a separate unit, but they all build on the basic idea that we create our experience of life, this moment, with our thoughts. And our thoughts lead to our feelings, our words, and our actions. But the starting point is our thoughts, and we're always in the now. We're always now. Now I get to choose my next thoughts, my next words, my next actions, and that takes us to today's subject, which is our midos, our character traits. Where in the Torah does it tell us to develop our midos, our character traits? The two words, v'alachta b'drachav, to walk in Hashem's ways. We want to emulate the Creator, and walking in Hashem's ways refers to developing our midos. The Hebrew word we use today for traits is our midos, midah singular, midos plural. Rambam, when he puts all the laws of Torah in 83 different sections, the Rambam puts the laws pertaining to our character traits, our midos, number 2. He calls it Hilchos Deos. The only thing that comes before that is Yesodei Torah, the foundations of Torah, Avas Hashem, loving our Creator, awareness of Hashem, Hashem is one, the Shema Yisrael. That is the first part in the Rambam. But right away, before any of other laws, Rambam talks about Hilchos Deos, developing our traits. It's very fascinating. The Rambam starts off by saying, Deos harbe yesh b'nei adam. People have many different traits. And he gives examples. And he says people are different. Some people are extreme in one way, some extreme the other way. The Rambam goes on with a whole list of different patterns. Now, Rambam is a book of law, Yad Chazaka. It's a major Torah law book. And over here, he doesn't seem to be saying a law. He just says a statement, observation of human nature. People are different. Some people get angry very easily. Some people hardly ever get angry. Some people are very generous. Some people are very stingy. Some people are very joyful. Some people are very sad. He's just saying a statement of observation. And the concept is that when it comes to other mitzvahs, let's say the mitzvah of hearing the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, everybody has the exact same mitzvah. When it comes to eating matzah and Pesach, everybody has the exact same mitzvah. However, when it comes to developing our character traits, each one of us is unique. We all have our individuality, and what we need to do is dependent where we are now. Where's our starting point? So that uniqueness, the same way everyone is unique, we have unique fingerprints, we have a unique tone of voice. Our accent is going to be based on where you grow up. Wherever we grew up, that's going to be our accent. You can tell somebody's English speakers, somebody was born in New York, somebody was born in Johannesburg, somebody was born in Melbourne, somebody was born in London, they're going to sound different even though they're all speaking English. And you can tell right away what their accent is. But when it comes to traits, we're all unique. No two people are the same. We all have unique mixture. And so when it comes to develop our traits, very valuable, important to know what positive traits do I want? What positive traits do I want to develop? Now Rambam says, how do we develop our traits? We need to keep many actions over time consistent with the positive trait. So to start speaking or acting consistent with a positive way of being is easy, just now. All you have to do it now. But to maintain it takes practice. And now we know about neural pathways that when you think a thought, say a word, take an action, you create neural pathways towards that thought, towards those words, towards those actions. And at any age, no matter how young or how old anyone is, we can change the way our brain structure is. When I was growing up as a young child, I used to think young children's brain changes. But after a while, your brain stays the same. Now they realize at any age, you can change your brain. Now Rambam tells us, what if we have a fault? That's Hilchos Deos Perik Beis, the second chapter. Rambam says if you have a fault, normally we should do the Shvil Azov, the Midim Tzoyis, the middle way. We always say wise balance. We need a wise balance when it comes to traits. However, if we have a fault, we should think, what will be the positive extreme, and consistently speak and act in that positive extreme for a while until it becomes our habit, our natural way of being, our spontaneous way of being, and then we should consistently go back to the middle way. So the Rambam talks about where do we get our traits from? It's amazing, Rambam wrote this many years ago, but very consistent with modern ideas. Some traits we're born with. Today we would use the word, it's our genetic makeup. We're born with these traits. And some traits we pick up from our environment. And the Rambam says it doesn't make a difference if we picked up our traits from our environment and we picked up our traits naturally, just naturally. First of all, in this class, whenever a telephone rings, we say, Baruch Hashem, I'm alive, and Baruch Hashem, I can hear. Thank God I'm alive, thank God I can hear. So we keep building up gratitude. And when Nation Torah started 40 years ago, there weren't any cell phones. But the place where we had the yeshiva, there were cars going near, for about a number of years, the cars going to the Kosel, to the Western Wall, and the road, and every once in a while we'd hear horns beeping. So then I say, whenever you hear a horn beeping, think, Baruch Hashem alive, Baruch Hashem I can hear. And now we do that with telephones. Whenever you hear a telephone ringing, Baruch Hashem alive, Baruch Hashem I can hear. That's relevant to class number 1, which we spoke about gratitude, which leads to happiness. Because every life situation is an opportunity to develop your character traits. It's a very valuable reframe. This too will help me develop my character traits. So no matter how challenging anything is, and the more challenging any situation is, challenges help us grow in our patterns of our positive traits. No matter what our spontaneous pattern is, we don't have to be stuck with it. Because we can consciously choose the middos we want. Now, how do you know what traits to focus on, what traits to develop? So there's one very important idea, number 35 of the 48 ways to Torah, to wisdom, is Ohev Esetochacha. Literal translation, loving criticism. And this could also be translated as loving feedback. Loving feedback means to say, we'll keep getting feedback. Whether people are satisfied with our traits or not satisfied. So we can always say, it's their fault for not accepting my way of being. But when we want to grow and we want to develop, we're grateful for opportunities to keep developing our traits. Now, you don't meet too many people who say, I love criticism so much, and that's why Joe is such a great person to be around. Because whatever you do, Joe will find fault with it. He'll always see what's wrong with it, what you could do better, and he's never satisfied with the way you are. And wherever Joe will always find it, even minor little points, he'll always notice it. It's so wonderful to be around Joe. I personally don't know anybody really who talks like that, because loving criticism is a beautiful concept. And as a Rebbe of mine, Rabbi Ginsburg, always used to say, when you reach for the stars, you might not catch any, but at least you won't get your hands in the mud. So the goal is strive high and know that to have joy for progress. Every little bit of improvement, every little bit of progress is a source of joy. Joy for progress. There's a thought that Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz always used to say, because one of the most important traits is patience and persistence. Because if you have patience and persistence, you can develop any skill, any talent, any positive trait. So that's important, very valuable to be patient. And it's so easy not to be patient. So easy to get frustrated. I remember once there was a fellow who came to Eshet Torah, this was many years ago, and this fellow told me that there was someone that he had met and he knew, and he really wanted to marry her. But she said she doesn't want to marry him. So he said, I'd really like somebody to speak to her to convince her to marry me. And he says, would you be willing to do that? I said, look, I don't really know you. You only came by a couple classes. And I don't want to talk anybody into marrying anybody. But if you want, I'll do a fact-finding mission. I'll ask her what her issues with you are and see if it's something you can develop, something you can work on. If that's what you want me to do, I'll be happy to do that. He says, I'd really rather you talk her into marrying me, but I can't find anybody to do that. So, well, at least that's something. Okay, call up. I said, this fellow came by Eshet Torah. I don't want to talk you into anything, but this fellow told me that he really liked to marry you. He says, yeah, I like him very much. And we know each other. We know each other for a couple of years. And I like him very much, except, I said, what are your issues with him? So he said, he's very impulsive. I can't see myself being married to someone who is so impulsive. So I asked her if he would learn to be patient, would you consider marrying him? He says, yeah, I like him very much, and if he'd be patient, that'd be wonderful. Then he wouldn't be impulsive. That'd be terrific. So I come back the next day, and I say, bad news and good news. The bad news, she still doesn't want to marry you, but the good news is that she said that you're very impulsive. And she says, she's right, I am. I acknowledge that. I'm very, very impulsive. He said, but if you learn to be patient, then she consider marrying you. So he asked, then how do I develop patience? I said, perfect question. That was the exact question you need to ask. How do I develop the positive trait? Wonderful. So I told him over the idea that I heard from Chaim Shmulevitz. I think it's a very valuable idea. He tells about a great teacher, Rabbi Preda, Gemara in Eruvin. Tells about this wonderful teacher of Preda, who had a student who was a little slow. And the student had to hear everything 400 times. And after 400 times, he understood. So Reb Chaim Shmulevitz used to ask on this, why didn't Reb Preda get himself a student who was a little faster? And he said that Reb Preda himself was working on developing the character trait of patience. So he looked at this student's need to hear everything 400 times as his wonderful opportunity to develop his own level of patience and persistence. So he didn't look at it as a waste of time repeating the ideas. He looked at it through repetition. I am creating my own patience. And if you can be patient, you can develop as I said before, any talent, any skill, any trait. So the fellow says to me, okay, now I know how to be patient. Call her up, tell her I'm patient. I said, are you joking? Are you serious? I said, I'm serious. You told me how to be patient. I know how to be patient. I said, if you think that you hear an idea one time and you're already patient just because you heard the idea, that's super impulsive. It takes time to, if you waited till tomorrow at least, have been patient for 24 hours. But to think just hearing an idea once and not living with it consistently, that you become patient, doesn't work like that. And that's really the key element, because we all have a tendency to be impatient. It's a natural quality. However, it's a beautiful trait to be patient. And that's the key in all our midos, every trait. So first, being open to hearing criticism, that if somebody tells you that you have some fault, now definitely there's positive ways of saying feedback and negative ways. We should definitely be calm, our tone of voice will play a role. But even if you love criticism or you love feedback, even if someone has not delivered it in the tone of voice, in the way they should, in the way to be more effective, but on the receiving end, we should take the feedback the way it's given and keep developing. And it's challenging. It's not easy. And that's the beauty of midos development, character development, in all our traits, is that it takes time, effort, and Vilna Gaon stated, our purpose in life is to develop our traits, refine our midos, develop positive qualities. Because otherwise, what is life for? Yes?
The way that feedback is given to us, but we don't really enjoy it as much as we want, but we still try to use it to benefit ourselves.
Right.
Should we go back? Should we still obtain that criticism, or do you find it unhealthy to still take it like that?
Okay. So ultimately, let's say whatever this person's intention was, whatever his motive was, sometimes the motive is just we annoy him. That frequently happens. Sometimes the motivation might be purely for our best interests, just they're not used to the pattern. Sometimes it's an immediate family member that cares about us a lot. But if it's true, if it's valid that we can still grow and develop in a trait, it would be wise to accept it as something that, okay, here is what I should work on. Now, very often, let's say the person who corrects us has the fault himself. So the sages say in Talmud, Tractate Yuma, Shod atzmecha v'achak shod acherim. First, correct yourself, then correct others. But a lot of times you'll find that people who have the same fault notice it more readily. And therefore, like I know somebody that I know very well, he told me when he was much younger, he was very, 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 he had a tendency to be a certain impulsive act, like if he stood up or sat down, like he did it with the speed of impulsivity. And he said the only people that ever pointed it out to him were people who do it themselves. Now, ultimately, if we're aiming for shleimus, that level of perfection, which we can never reach perfection, and it says, Lo alecha amlocha likmar, it says in Pirkei Avos, we're never going to complete the work. There's so much to do, we'll never complete it. It goes on learning Torah, but it also goes on character development. Just because we're not going to hit perfection, we shouldn't give up. So the fact, don't aim for perfection, aim for progress. And we need always a wise balance, and it takes a lot of life experience to know what wise balance means, what it means to any individual. We'll get that wisdom with time, also, whenever you meet a person with a positive trait, learn from that positive trait. And one way to learn from people with positive traits is to read biographies of great Torah scholars. When you read biographies of great people, you read about the positive traits they had, the positive qualities. Like a neighbor of mine, Rabbi Yehuda Samet and Rebbetzin Samet, put out a book recently called My Father, My Mother, and Me on Kibbud Avim, honoring your parents. And they have 170 stories in the book of how different ideas about Kibbud Avim, honoring and treating your parents respectfully. Now, ultimately, no one person can do what many different people have done. However, we can keep picking up positive lessons and how to be. And that's the beauty of importance of reading positive Torah biographies. My father was a student of the Chavetz Chaim. My father would always tell us stories about the Chavetz Chaim, and it definitely had a major impact on my life. And so we all gain a lot from the stories we hear. And a lot of times people get tired of hearing the same stories over and over again, but years later they'll say, my grandfather always told me, my grandmother always told me, my father always told me, my mother always told me. They'll say those stories they got tired of hearing over and over again, but they'll say them over because they're very meaningful and they get integrated and internalized. Also, when we see people with a fault, ask yourself, in what ways do I personally have this fault? You might not have it the same way this other person has it. This person might be much more extreme than you, but you might have some aspects of that fault. And I feel it's very valuable to go through the alphabet, go through ABCs to think about positive traits and think about ABCs of negative traits. Like we think A, altruism, B, C, D, keep going down, positive traits, and the C is compassion, caring, D, dedicated, determined. Yes?
You have a book on the ABC. What is the name of that book?
There's a book that called
It's excellent.
Begin Again Now is in alphabetical order of different traits. Also, a book called Gateway to Self-Knowledge. I even have a whole page who should not read the book. It's a challenging book because there's 100 pages of text about character traits and character development, and then most of the book is questions, and there's 400 pages of 200 traits, questions about each trait, and define strengths and weaknesses, because it's not either we have the trait or don't have the trait, it's in what way do I have this, in what way don't I have it, when am I at my best, when am I at my worst, who brings it out, what are factors. For instance, yesterday was a fast day, and a fast day a lot of times, during the fast, after the fast, sometimes we can be more irritable, it can be challenging. We're tired, we're hungry. In our different states, sometimes in a better state, it's easier to be the positive trait. Or in challenging situations and our feelings are challenged, then we tend to act at our worst. So by any positive trait, see in what ways do I have the positive trait, in what ways don't I have the positive trait, and it's a constant lesson if living life that where am I now? Yes.
How can you do it in a work situation, in a workplace, when the boss is looking at your work and he sees a trait that you're not good at.
Yes.
And he demoted you, and he took a partial of your payment and he put it in his pocket.
Yes.
You won't get it back. It's like he took something from you.
Yes. So it's very, very
you
distressful.
Have to work on it, but yet you just lost something.
Right.
And
very valid point. It's going to be very distressful.
Like, if I work on this, then I get this back.
Okay. Definitely we be assertive, speaking up for our rights, and it's super important to do it in a tone of voice that is mutually respectful. Always keeping our self-respect and respect for the other person. And definitely depends on who we're interacting with.
And
Sometimes
hopefully he won't take that
yes.
20 cents away from you.
And that we need to be very, very, very practice. And that's why very good, especially in times and moments when we really need to be at our best, it's definitely worthwhile practicing. Practice with a friend, practice.
Friends are good.
One way to practice a positive trait is in front of a mirror. So that's where you get instant feedback. The Rambam's idea about building up, developing the quality of giving, which is so valuable. So the Rambam talks about how doing many times, like he says, in case a person is very stingy and it's difficult for someone to be a giving person, to give to others. So what we should do is, let's say, break down a bill, let's say you have 100, whatever it is, shekels, dollars, rand, pounds, any currency it's going to be, break it down into singles and do many actions over time. The more actions you do, the more you create that positive quality. And especially traits that are more challenging for us, and it depends, different people will challenge different qualities.
Hopefully it's your friends that are challenging it and not your enemies.
Right. So point definitely raises a valid point, and both our friends can challenge us in certain ways. Sometimes a close friend is going to let their hair down. They're not going to always speak. Somebody you're really, really close with, they'll feel okay. They don't have to be at their best. A stranger, they act the best. Almost everyone can find that with somebody you don't really know, you're gonna treat the person. A stranger calls up on the telephone. If you're really upset, a member of the family, a person can talk to any stranger in a real positive way. We'll talk tomorrow that the class is going to be on anger than our teacher. We'll elaborate on that subject. However, when it comes to general qualities and character traits, fascinating subject, because there's so many different possibilities, and every situation is a unique challenge. And we mentioned before that going through the alphabet to think in terms of different positive traits, certain negative traits. Which negative traits? Now, on one level, we're biased because we definitely want to see ourselves in a positive light. And that's, we gave a whole class on building your self-image of others. Some people have a tendency to be very self-critical, more self-critical than they're critical of others. And a lot of people, it's the other way around, more critical of others than themselves. So that's the importance of self-knowledge. And that's why any book on self-knowledge has the following challenge, that we're all unique, and the only way we can get self-knowledge is by our self-recognizing our patterns. But we're biased. And again, that's why it's so good to listen to get open to feedback. Also, when you read about great people, hear stories of great people. We should learn to emulate them. Yes?
But with those stories, I don't feel like you really you don't really know about their feedback personally. It's just a little deeper, I feel like.
Uh-huh.
But most of the time, you look at that person, you see what good things they've done, and you want to emulate them.
Yeah.
But there's also feedback where they may have had a lot of negative feedback. It's been negative.
Okay. When I say great people, the people I'm thinking of, let's say my father was a student of the Chavetz Chaim. He was a person who everybody that ever interacted with him for dealing with many, many years saw his super positive qualities. He was super sincere about keep developing himself. And so a lot of great people, they're great. Now, it's possible. We can learn from Ezu Chacham, Haloi Mikol Adam. Really, we should learn from everybody, no matter who the person is. Learn from every single person. And that, it says that's a wise person, the one to learn from everybody. So even if we meet somebody who does have a lot of faults, find what positive qualities they had. Maybe there's someone who is very assertive. Now his problem might be he's way too assertive. His assertiveness turns into aggression. So we don't want to learn from him to have that aggression, but we do want to see, he speaks up. Let's see how I can learn from that, not to do it exactly the way this person's doing it. He might speak very chutzpahdik to other people, insolently to other people, and not speak respectful, but how can I speak up in a way that's respectful? Somebody else might be just like the person's a salesman, and the only reason he's speaking positively is because he wants to make the sale. It's not his total trait. But you still see the pattern. I see the way he's talking now. Hey, that's a pattern I can learn from. He's praising this person now. Let's say he wants somebody to buy a suit, or buy some clothing from him, so he's praising how you look in it. And he might be, you don't want to do it the exact same way. He might just be exaggerating because it was a sale, but you say, wow, I see this person smiling. I see how this person made that person feel good. I see how learn from somebody who gives people encouragement. So we'll have many, many, many role models when we learn from every good quality in each person. Again, it has to be done in the full picture, full perspective. And my father has a beautiful essay on Reb Shimon Shkop, great Torah scholar. It was published after he was head of yeshiva for 50 years. They put out a major Sefer Yovel, a book written by many different Torah scholars and people that heard him speak and studied under him. And my father wrote an essay. My father had studied not in Grodno, where he was the head of yeshiva, but my father studied in Radin. My father wrote an essay and he spoke about telescopes and microscopes. That a microscope takes something very small and makes it big. Telescope makes something very far away and brings it close. And Reb Shimon Shkop said, had that quality of, in Torah, when he gave his Torah lectures, he took ideas from many different sources. They're far away, bring them close, and some points are very small, and he enlarged on them. But so this idea of seeing telescope, microscope, we can also understand this in relevance to developing positive traits. If you see a small positive quality in someone, be with a microscope, see that as big, and try to emulate it, learn from it. Some can be far away. They live real far away. You have to read one article in a newspaper about something you saw that positive trait. We can learn from it. So this way makes life fascinating, an adventure, and character development. So to summarize, Torah point, to develop your character traits, it's not a minor thing, it's a major thing. It's the foundation, as Reb Chaim Vital writes, character trait, character development is the foundation of the entire Torah. And working on our traits, the simcha shel mitzvah. The joy, one way is feeling really bad if we see a fault, but so much better to feel that joy of developing our traits. And even if we see there's a lot of, wow, isn't that so much work? And that way is, yeah, wow, it makes my life exciting. Life is an adventure in midos development, and we can keep growing and developing and never always be resilient, never get too frustrated, feel, oh no, I've been working on this trait for so long, and I still have so much to go. The other way is think in terms of, I'm so glad that I have many opportunities, I'm glad that I'm aware of my patterns, and I want to keep developing my patterns today and always.